Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I'm really sorry that I'm not able to be there with you guys today due to my final examinations. So I hope that you will enjoy listening to my sermon. First off, I want to thank Elliot for reading today's passage, and let us get on to the sermon for today. So the first thing I want to play with you guys is a little trivia. It's a little game where we answer some questions about, safety procedures during a hurricane and what to do, what not to do, basically, and just facts about like hurricanes in general. And you can pause after I read each statement, and you guys can answer all together, and I will give you the answer right after you pause, um, after I say my statement. So let's get on with this trivia game. So the first statement I'm going to give you guys is, okay, so the safest place to be in a hurricane is in the basement. True or false? If you guess true, you're correct. Okay. The second statement, if a hurricane is coming, you should make sure that you have a portable electric stove. True or false? I'd be a little concerned if you get this one wrong. If you answered false, that is correct. It would be better to have a gas stove because people often lose power during a hurricane. So if you have a portable electric stove, I don't know where you're going to necessarily get your electricity from. So yeah. Anyways, third statement. This is a little tricky, but the eye of a hurricane is the worst part. True or false? And this requires a little bit of scientific knowledge. Okay. The answer to this statement is false. The eye is the center of the hurricane where no wind blows. Okay. So then second to last statement is if a window or door is open during a hurricane, winds can lift off the roof of the house. True or false? And this is if the hurricane is strong enough. If you answer true, you are correct. A house should be shut tight to be able to survive wind pressure. Okay, if you leave your door open, like all components of it is going to go flying. It's crazy. Okay. Now, the last statement. The best place to be during a hurricane is on a boat. True or false? And this is in real life, not with the passage. So think in real life. Is it okay to be in a boat during a hurricane? Okay. The answer to this is false. It is one of the worst places to be because storms pick up momentum as they come out of the ocean and onto shore. So I'd be a little concerned if I see you guys on a ship in the middle of the ocean during a hurricane. Okay, don't do that. It's not safe. Now, here's another question. What's the first thing that you should do when you hear a hurricane coming? And I will give you, it's like a multiple choice question, okay? So the first option, A, scream and cry for mama. Okay. Option B, dig a giant tunnel in the ground and crawl to China. Option C, check how bad the hurricane is supposed to be and either prepare your house or make plans to stay somewhere else if it's going to hit hard. And option D, buy tons of water and food and hide in the basement. Now, for me, I would think it's like, I would say D, buy tons of water and food, but actually this answer key says C, check how bad a hurricane is supposed to be, either prepare your house or make plans to stay somewhere else if it's going to hit hard. And I feel like that makes sense because obviously if you realize that your house is not the safest place to be in a hurricane, you would want to move out. But anyways, so we're going to talk about this passage that Elliot just read for us today. So today we're going to talk about a really bad storm. It's recorded in the passage. And in the storm, Jesus' disciples were in the worst place they could possibly be. Do you remember where the worst place to be in a storm is? It's a boat. Correct. A boat. And guess what? That's where Jesus' disciples were because they were going to head to the other side of the lake. Now, Jesus had been teaching all day and a whole crowd of people have been listening. It's been such a long day and Jesus decided they should get in a boat and go to the other side, the Sea of Galilee, and take a break from all those people that they just encountered. Remember, Jesus was extremely popular because of all of his miracles that he did and all the things that he taught. And he was surrounded by people wherever he went. Kind of like how crazy fans, they scream when they see like Justin Bieber, except unlike Justin, Jesus didn't push his fans away or tell them to stop screaming. But there came a point in which Jesus really had to just get some rest, and so him and his disciples took a boat across the lake and Jesus fell asleep. Now it's easy to understand why, because he'd been teaching all day long, and people get exhausted after teaching for a really long day. And those people probably had so many questions, like reporters that you see in the news when they ask like questions every time. It's like famous people and they're like just like screaming questions at you. It's crazy. Yes, Jesus is God, but he's also human. He's totally exhausted. Now, Jesus's disciples couldn't just turn on like a TV set and be like, oh my gosh, like a big storm is coming. They don't have TVs back then. So they had no idea, that like this huge storm was going to come, and it took them by complete surprise. And so they were fishermen, so they dealt with a few storms before, but this one was a monster. They were super scared, especially since they had read on the internet that the boat was the worst place to be. Just kidding. They don't have internet back then. You know what I mean? So it was a dark and scary night, literally, and waves started crashing over all sides of the boat as the winds were howling. Can you imagine what that would be like if you're on a ship and you just hear like winds and like the waves are like splashing? It's insane. It would drive me nuts. I would be seasick. And the boat actually started filling with water. That's not good. So what would you have done at that point? So pause this video and discuss with each other. What would you have done if you realized that your boat is filling with water and waves start crashing in and the winds are blowing? How would you feel and what would you do in that moment? Okay, now that you guys have discussed your answers, we'll talk about what disciples would have done. So the disciples probably threw everything overboard that they could in order to try to save the boat from going underwater. All their supplies, food, equipment, maybe even their PlayStations. Just kidding. They don't have PlayStations back then either, but it's just not enough. And then, you have Jesus on the side. He's just, snoozing away on a pillow. Nothing's happening around him. How could he be asleep in such a storm? I know some really heavy sleepers. I've heard of a person who actually slept with a seatbelt over their face. And I heard of another guy who actually slept during an action movie, like in a 4D movie theater, and he did not wake up, even when the chairs were like moving back and forth and water was spraying in his face and he was just like sleeping. I'm like, okay. But the storm was way worse than any of that. And the boat was about to, it was about to tip over, and Jesus is still like, he's just sleeping. He didn't wake up. So the disciples decide to go wake him up, but they're scared out of their minds, thinking that they're literally going to die. They shouted something like, Jesus, wake up, we're going to drown. Like, do you even care? And they were pretty surprised about what Jesus did next. He like just got up. He didn't even he didn't get up. He didn't start screaming at all. He didn't say anything like, we're all going to die, like most of us would have. He wasn't even like worried. He was perfectly calm. He just got up and he was like, quiet, be still. And guess what happened next? The sea instantly got calm. The wind went away and the waves sunk back into the smooth, glassy surface of the lake, just like it was before the storm had hit. And just like that, Jesus spoke and the storm ended. Finito, finished. After Jesus calmed the storm, he was like, why are you guys so afraid? Like to all the disciples, like, do you still have no faith? And the disciples had been with Jesus and had seen his miracles and heard his teaching. So it was pretty shocking that they still didn't realize what he was capable of. I don't know about you, but I would love to have that power. House, a mess, no problem. Just say, be clean. Bully about to attack, just call out, stay still. And he stops in his tracks. Sure would be useful, but how do you imagine people would react if they saw you make things happen like that? So pause again and talk amongst yourselves. How do you, like, if you had that power to just say certain things and, whatever you say actually happens in front of you, like, how would people react? Okay, I'm sure you guys came up with a lot of great answers. And yes, your friends or people around you would probably freak out. They'd either want you to like sign their autographs and be like, oh my gosh, like you're Superman, Batman, like you got all these powers, or they would run away from you like very fast because they're terrified. Well, Jesus's disciples were really, really freaked out at that time. They were actually terrified of the fact that Jesus could calm a storm simply by talking, just by his words. They even started talking behind Jesus's back, saying things like, what kind of guy is this? Like, even the wind and the waves do what he says. Now, obviously, the disciples didn't really understand who Jesus was, even though they had spent plenty of time with him. It's like having Peter Parker at your house and not knowing that he's Spider-Man, like Ned just found out that he was Spider-Man. He's like, oh my gosh, many people saw Jesus just as a regular guy, but he looked like any other human back then, when he was on Earth. But his powers are limitless because he is God. Even to this day, many of us don't really understand what God is really capable of. The fact is, nothing is impossible for God, and he can do way more than what we can imagine. Now, this could scare you like it did for the disciples, because it means that God is way more powerful than you or me. He can punish us when we do wrong. However, the Bible says that God is love, which means he loves us very much, and he often uses his great powers to help us. So here are some questions for you. What kind of storm is going on in your life that you need Jesus to calm? Do you really believe he can fix the situation? Or will you cry and scream like the disciples did and believe that Jesus doesn't care? Talk amongst yourselves and see what you guys come up with. God really does care in the end, and you must ask him to calm the storm and trust that he will in his time. Now, a lot of us may think that, if something doesn't happen right away, we get frustrated, just like the disciples were frustrated that Jesus was sleeping and wasn't really like concerned about the storm going on. But in reality, and then you start, the other thing is that you try to fix the problems by yourself, but don't try doing that. You should talk to the one who's more powerful than you can imagine and allow him to calm the storm. That was my sermon for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you.